So Robert Peel founded the modern police force on the basis of consent. The police are the public and the public are the police. That was his key principle. So it's always been important in Britain for the police to be recruited from the local community. Here in Leicester, where we are this morning, the 2011 census found that only 45% of its population is white British. Today, 49% come from the black and minority ethnic communities, but only 6.7% of Leicestershire's police force came from those communities, and they're mostly at constable level. So is it time for the police to favour black candidates? Maxie Hales, a human rights activist, you're really exercised about this. You think it's been far too long. It needs to happen now. How do we get this change?
By legislation, of course. They did it in Northern Ireland.
One-on-one in a recruitment.
One-on-one, yes, 50-50 auto. Yeah. The Labour Party did it, introduced Sex Discrimination Act to bring more women to the Parliament. And so one writer says, we're on the same ship but not the same deck. What has actually happened here is we've got an entrenched, historical, institutionalized racist government under the police force, which actually prevents the promotion of black people. Equal opportunity means not just to, let's look at McFarlane. McFarlane report, the Met recruited 3 times the amount of black candidates until now. But what do? They park them there. The equal opportunity should mean, mechanism should be in the system whereby they're promoted. Logan can tell you that, and others can tell you that the difficulty for going through is horrendous. And so therefore, what the government need to do is to legislate so that they can bring us...
Change the law.
Change the law. And not only that, the people who are at fault are the Home Secretaries, plural, and also Chief Constables. They are the ones responsible for the lack of promotion. It's 47 years now.
So what about the argument against that you're changing the law so you can promote black people over white people, whatever their qualifications, whatever their merit,
as I said to you before, had it not been this endemic, institutionalized racism, then there wouldn't be a need for that.
Okay, but Paul Fitzgerald, what do you think about this? What are the problems here?
Well, the public sector has spent millions of pounds on diversity and equality training across the board, not just the police. We need to be really careful here. This isn't just happening in the police service, it's happening in the NHS, in local authorities and in the fire service. So it's endemic across the board. And Max is absolutely right that institutional racism is hugely problematic, despite the amount of money that's been spent. This isn't just about recruitment, it's about progression and retention. So once we get people in those senior positions, we need to keep them there by constantly reviewing. The McFarlane report brought about the investigation into institutional racism to look at what that was actually
What are the inherent problems with this?
The barriers. There are not enough barriers. There is not enough. We haven't really worked out what positive action is all about. You know, we haven't removed positive action from the process. We need to really promote and look at how we instill positive action from start to finish. And positive action is about looking at our underrepresented groups and going out and talking to and meeting and working with people to encourage them to join whatever the sector is, to come forward and put themselves forward.
Rather than legislating.
Legislation can be just one part of it, but legislation, as we've already highlighted, brings extra red tape. We've had the legislation in place. This is about the institutional discriminatory practice that still goes on from McFarlane to the present day, where we're still not moving those things forward.
Okay. Tom, do you want to come in here? What do you think about this? It needs to change because a place like Leicester, the police needs to adequately represent the population of Leicester, of Bristol, of Birmingham, of London.
Of course, we want to see a police force and indeed I think all of our public services that are representative, but I think that has to happen as a natural process based on merit. And what I find very concerning is that there's this conversation that says one of the reasons we need black police officers in these positions is to be able to speak to the black community. But I think what my concern would be is that we might shift into this ghettoisation mentality where people can only be spoken to by other people of their race.
Based on merit. Based on merit. Am I hearing right? He's like asking Usain, he's like running the 100 meters or the 200 meters with Usain Bolt. You know, and expect to win him, to run and win a race. As I said, it's not 47 years ago, the first police officer was appointed. And until today, it's only a handful of officers are seen in. There is no merit. We will wait forever if we're talking about merit. We need legislation now.
Well, I think it's a multi-pronged attack. I think there's issues around positive action that we can do here and now. You're talking about talent spotting, talent management, bringing up to the assessment pool so they can actually compete with their majority culture colleagues, and as a result of that, be judged on their merits. We've seen in America where positive action has been tried, but have gone to positive discrimination. However, we've seen people pushing back on that because they're saying, well, you only got there because you're black. Even now, as a superintendent, people think I'm only a superintendent because I was black, but I was judged on merits, and we've got to make sure that we don't have pushback.
But we've waited too long for that.
Yeah, I agree, but like everything, we need to even the direct entry scheme that is being consulted about, we need to look at how we can start to get the affirmative action, because we're in the Metropolitan Black Police Association. I've said there's an importance to do that. So it's a multi-point. We've got the short term in terms of positive action, but also on the medium and long term, we're bringing the legislative changes for affirmative action and positive discrimination.
David Jennings.
The answer to your question, Nikki, is yes, but I think the use of the word favour, I think, is unfortunate because it gives us a bit of a slant and an emotive slant at that. I think what we're talking about is encouragement and enabling black people to actually become senior police officers, because going back to Sir Robert Peel's...
Positively discriminate means
the legislation
favour,
is there to give the framework, as the gentleman was saying earlier, but it's the practice that actually counts.
Well, in Northern Ireland it was favouring, wasn't it? And it had to happen because there were huge cultural and political barriers.
But nobody's actually talking about dumbing down the police service, and nobody's talking about not having suitable candidates for the senior officers. And I think if we go back to what Robert Peel was saying, is that we have a police service that polices by consent. We're not a police state, and that means the police service has to be representative of the whole of the community. If we had an all-male police force, people would be jumping up and down and saying, you know, where are the women and so on. So it's important that action is taken to ensure that our police force really is representative of the population it has to serve.
We've heard about the Northern Ireland example. It's really important to get this right. The Northern Ireland example is not about quotas discrimination on the grounds of race or sex. It's on the grounds of religion and religion alone. Now, at the moment in this country, England and Wales, the law is very specific about not discriminating on the grounds of race or sex or gender. That's very, very specific. If we're going to change the law about the police, I think we have to change the law for society as a whole. So if we're going to have not positive action, affirmative action, if we're going to have positive discrimination, quotas, then that has to be for the whole of society, all professions, broadcasting, the church, education, health. It has to be completely across the board. And I don't think this country is quite ready to make that step yet.
You said in your time in the police, you've said that you never saw any racism.
No.
Well, let me come.
You need to be on the receiving end.
No, wait a second. Sorry, OK. I'm saying about my experience. That's the only experience.
But how proactive were you about finding out what was going on in an organisation? Because, unfortunately, they have an open-door policy, but no one's going to come in your office and say, oh, by the way, Chief, I'm being attacked racially and everything. You have to be very proactive, and that's been one of the issues.
Until the processes change under this government, you might recall that I started as a constable. And I started in a constable in Bristol, and I worked in the St Paul's area of Bristol. So my experience is not just simply about my recent experience as chief. It's about a whole career.
David McFarlane, looking at the career progression of these two gentlemen, is there a story to be told?
Absolutely. I mean, in 1967, when the first black officer joined the Met with Sir Paul Condon became commissioner. The first black officer, Nora Roberts, became detective sergeant. And the same thing is happening. OK, Leroy Logan's a few more ranks higher, so things are improving, but not as fast as it should.
Why didn't you get as high as Tim?
Sorry?
Why didn't he get as high as Tim?
Let me explain what happens.
Tim is white.
Let me explain.
Is that why?
Yes, that's one of the main reasons.
Let me explain.
Is that the main reason?
That's one of the main reasons.
Could I explain, Nikki, what's happening in the police service? And I suspect it's happening elsewhere. You get both Tim and Leroy join the police service. Tim gets all the training, all the support in order to make it up. Leroy doesn't get the encouragement. And what happens when they go for an interview for promotion? Of course, Tim is going to be better because he's got all the interview, he's done all the preparation for it, except Leroy. So what I'm saying, we need to... Could I finish first?
That is a total and utter travesty of my life.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. It's a travesty of my life.
I had 30 years experience in the police service and dealt with many colleagues right across the United Kingdom.
Wait, let's all calm down a little bit.
I came from a working class background in Bristol, and I was the first generation from my family to get to A-levels and to get to university and to get a degree and to go through the very, very intense selection system that...
Tim, I was not being personal. I'm just giving an example of what happens in the police service between Europeans and non-Europeans.
Not a very good example.
Let's get back on track. The police are kind of a special case here because they have to blend into the community, they have to work with communities. How do we get to that stage? We have to get to that stage. Look at Leicester. We had the figures earlier on. Something like 50% black, minority ethnic, something like 90%, it's in the 95%, something like that, and the police are white. And there are other great cities of ours in exactly the same situation where communities do not feel properly served and properly represented. Birmingham, Bristol, London. How do we get there now?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that the police have made a great deal of progress in the areas. And
how do we get there soon?
Well, you can't do it soon because, and it's not for any of the reasons, it's a very practical reason. You can't do it soon because I'm afraid to bring in spending cuts. At the moment, we're talking about losing thousands of police posts across the country. And the ranks that are getting thinned out most quickly are the ranks that Leroy represents. It's going to be a very difficult job, not simply to get people from minority ethnic backgrounds through the ranks of the service. It's going to be very difficult for the next 5 to 10 years to get anybody through the ranks of the service.
But is that the expense of police legitimacy?
Leroy?
I know there's spending, but it can't be at the expense of police legitimacy. You've got to have a diverse workforce to reflect the diverse community. There's an inextricable link. And the better you treat your diverse personnel, the more equipped you are to serve the needs of a diverse community. So that's police legitimacy and relevance, and I think it's really important that the organisation has to put that
wait a minute, on Tom's kind of point, Maxie, how far does this go? Should you be sending, what about, should they be predominantly Asian recruits in Leicester? Should they be going into Asian neighbourhoods where a crime has been perpetrated? Should white police be going into white neighbourhoods? Some people say you've got a terrible, worrying slope.
The police force should reflect the diversity community which it represents.
Right.
It's not doing that. Let me just tell you this. Research shows us, research identified that black people, in order to get equality, we'll have to wait another 100 years to 350 years before we get true equality. We want equality in our lifetime and in our children's lifetime. They're drawing their feet. Too much speeches by chief constables constantly. Home Office or Home Secretaries come and they put the brakes on, they block the promotion of black people within these forces. It's about time. They wake up and smell the coffee.
Nicky.
Let's hear from audience in a second. David, if I can, I'll come to you in a second. Let's hear from audience. Yeah, good morning. How are you doing?
I have to say, I disagree with Tim. I'm really shocked he's never witnessed any racial abuse in the police force. But I agree with Officer Leroy. We don't need to have more black and Asian officers. We need to have less racist officers. I mean, I've got a very personal story. When I was younger, we had our own house in a council estate. And we witnessed, especially after 2001, a lot of racial abuse, a lot of things thrown at our house, a lot of abuse when we left our house. We were basically hiding in our house for a good 2 years. And when we asked the police for help, we got nothing. A baby, I was a baby.
Yeah. Well, and what were the police? That's a terrible story. People will feel for you, their hearts will go out to you. What, the police gave you nothing? What did they say? What do your parents say about that now?
Well, we asked the police for help. They just said, there's not much we can do. And all we had to do was get enough money to move house. What if we couldn't afford it? And since I was 8 years old, I was afraid of all white men.
That's a fascinating point because we have these statistics. Right now, there are 7 times more black and Asians stopped and searched per 1,000 of population.
27 times more like.
Hang on 1 second. There are 10 times greater chance for black and minority ethnic people to die in police custody.
Yeah.
If there were more, let me ask you then, if there were more black and minority ethnic police, would those statistics be the same? Would that improve?
Not necessarily, because you also have to remember it's not about numbers. It's also around the organisation recognising the importance of having diversity, supporting and nurturing all personnel, police officers and police staff, so that if there is inefficiencies internally or disproportionalities in service delivery, then it will be addressed. just like we see at the moment, certain racist cases are increasing. The reason being, I think, is around the Stephen Lawrence steering group that used to hold chief constables to account with performance indicators, not only around retention progression, but about service delivery. The Home Secretaries, Charles Clarke, David Blunkett, got rid of it, and as a result of that, chief constables were not held to account, and if it's not measured, it's not done.
Yeah, we had some other audiences as well. The other argument is, the argument here against it is if you've got fire, you don't care about the colour of the firefighter. If your house is burgled, you just want somebody to solve your crime. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I just want to make 2 points very similar to what you're saying. First thing is the case of what does society want. Me personally, it would be the case of I want to feel safer or want to be safer. I'm not too bothered about who's doing it. Second point is the case of the officer needs to have the right skills. It will come through diversity at the same time, but I would question in terms of the funnel effect. So how many people from the ethnic minority group are coming forward to go into the police force, and I would assume that white people are coming forward more than the ethnic diversity.
Because there can be as well, can't there, Maxie? There can be hostility from some black communities towards some black police officers. They use abusive terms like black on the outside, white on the inside.
Nicky, when I joined in the early 80s, yes, I had experiences of that, but it was understandable considering the relationship between the police and, of course, people like myself and Leroy. We're in the middle of it and we're working very hard. But I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Nobody, I'm certainly not saying it, and hopefully Max is not saying it, that we want people who are unqualified to be in the police service. There's a difference between affirmative action and positive discrimination. Let me make that absolutely clear. And the other point I would like to make, it's not just about the business imperative about it, but the operational needs too, understanding, because nothing worse than you get an officer get to a scene, meeting members of the public and cannot speak the language. And here in Leicester, it's very, very important. So we need to have that, and we need to work very hard.
Rabbi Shockett, how far do we go? Sort of Jewish police in North London and Muslim police at the East London Mosque. How far do we go with this?
I think positive or negative discrimination, one way or the other, is always wrong. Equal opportunity is the cornerstone of society. What is critical to consider over here is that there is a certain blatant distrust between authority and various different ethnic minorities. What has to happen is that, and in fact that was probably part of the trigger of the London riots as they happened, because there was a black man who was shot by white police, and that's what triggered everything off. And essentially what has to happen is that there has to be more of a recruitment drive within the black community. Indeed, it does go on within the Jewish community. And then all those who are recruited should be given equal opportunity to make their way through the ranks.
Yeah. But how are you going to get
As a British Indian, and let's put this in perspective, the British police do a fantastic job, especially compared to the Indian police. Okay, fantastic. Even compared to the French and the Germans, we've got lower ratios of policemen to population as well. But that doesn't mean that we rest on our laurels. I mean, I went in a car to Stratford-upon-Avon when I was a youngster, and I was told to turn back to where you come from, by police officers.
Well, they did do a great job with that lady there who told us that story. It still bears the scars of it.
Let me just say this. If you're black, you're 27 times more likely to be stopped by the police and harassed and humiliated. If you are black, you're more likely not to receive a caution. If you're black, you're more likely to be referred to the court. If you're black, you're more likely to be given custodial sentence. Tell me that's amount to systematic institutional racism.
You, sir, is that what it amounts to?
I'm sure there are difficulties with the police force. I mean, I think a more general picture, a couple of people over there have said that what is needed, what is being said is that the police force are doing a great job, although I accept there's some difficult circumstances, difficult situations that have not been dealt with well, but we need to be encouraging more people to join the police force. And that should be done by giving them more money, because we're not going to help people to come forward to the police force by cutting salaries. Regulation A19, where we're throwing away experienced officers. There's a more general issue there.
There is. Thank you all very much indeed for taking part. Thank you for your thoughts.